It is good to see you guys today. I hope you've had a great week. As we jump in this morning, before we get started, I just wanted to say thank you. You guys have been incredible to our family over the last several weeks and providing food and prayers and all kind of stuff. We are just so incredibly blessed to be a part of Trailhead Church, and thank you for all that you have done for us. We even had a family catch our dogs after they got out. I don't know if that was a gift or a curse that they brought them back, but they did, and it was nice for the kids anyway. So, no, I really do appreciate you guys. Love you guys. So today, as we jump in, we are actually continuing what we started last week as we're talking about life givers. We're continuing the series that we started on Easter Sunday. And as we do that, I want to start off this morning by asking you kind of a trivia type question. Any of you guys trivia buffs? Anybody like, Jeopardy, that kind of stuff? A couple of you? All right, so if anybody gets this question, I'm going to be incredibly impressed, right? So I'll actually vouch for you to make it onto Jeopardy if you get the answer to this. So I'm going to give you a date, and when I give you that date, if you know the significance of that date, just say it out, all right? So here is the date, April 3rd, 1973. Anybody know the significance of that date?
Your birthday.
No, I've had a couple of people say that. I'm younger than that. Thanks, sir. Not my birthday. Anybody else have an idea?
No, my birthday.
All right. Like I said, there's really no reason you should know this, but this is a date in history that actually gave us a new way of doing life. On April 3rd, 1973, a guy who was an engineer for Motorola took his big brick block phone and walked out into Manhattan in New York and made the first cell phone call in the history of the world. He actually called a competitor of theirs. So this engineer at Motorola called AT&T and said, "Hey, can you hear me?" And as he's talking to him, he says, "I'm actually standing on the street in New York, not attached to a wire or anything else, because we have actually done it. We created the first phone." And this is kind of what it would have looked like, those big, huge brick phones they had. I read this week as I was looking at this that it would be another 10 years or so before these were available to the public. So in the early 1980s, you could buy this phone for about $10,000, which sounds like a steal, right? Every one of us wants that. It was another 10 years after that, so in the early 90s, before phones really became used publicly by people all over. But this was an entirely new way to do life. For those of you who have grown up since the 90s, you think this is just life and this is the way it's always been. But this was an entirely new way of doing life. It kept you connected to people around you. It just opened up a whole new world of the way that you did life. I remember when I first got a phone, my mom, if I was going on a trip, if I was driving somewhere, she would tell me, "Make sure you've got your phone. Take your phone with you, because if you get in a wreck, how are you going to call somebody if you don't have your phone with you?" This was a whole new concept to her as well, and so, it was just this huge idea that you could make a phone call from anywhere. You don't have to find a payphone. But not only did it change our connectivity, this phone eventually changed the way that we think about our day planners, our calendars. If you're like me, you work off of your phone, right? You have everything in your calendar in your phone. You text and you use email on your phone, all of those things. Just another example of how it changed the world. How many of you guys, before like 2005, had a camera with you everywhere that you went? One or two people, yeah, not many. A few people had cameras. How many of you, if you did have a camera, how many of you took a video camera with you everywhere you went before 2005? Yeah, that's like carrying a briefcase on your shoulder, right? You didn't have a video camera. Every one of us now have a camera that's like higher quality than most any camera you would have had before. We have video cameras where anything in the world happens, we can capture it immediately, right? It's just this whole new way of experiencing the world because of this thing that came out on April 3rd, 1973. We have a whole new way of doing life now. And good or bad, however you want to classify it, it is what it is. It's a whole new way of doing life. If you were with us last weekend, you know that we started talking about the fact that because of Jesus, because of the death and resurrection of Jesus at Easter, and then as he appeared to people after that, because of that, we have a whole new way of experiencing the world and a whole new way of doing life. Like I said, we're calling this series Life Givers, and the whole idea that we started to unpack last weekend is the idea that because of the death and resurrection of Jesus, we can have life. Not just breathing in and out, we can have life that is truly life. We can experience life in a whole new way. We talked about the fact that what Jesus did on the cross was he separated the rules from grace, right? So he fulfilled the Old Testament. He lived out the entire Old Testament. He took care of that for us so that now we can live by grace. It's an entirely new way of life. And what we're going to see today is that God wants us to join him in this process of doing life in a new way and giving life to others. If you let that sink in for a minute, if you think about that phrase that we just used, God wants you to be a life giver. That may be a little bit intimidating, right? How do we do that? How in the world can you be a life giver? If you were with us last week, again, we talked about the fact that really there's only one life giver. I mean, there's only one who's ever taken anything inanimate and given it life. There's only one who ever took the dust of the earth and breathed into it and it came alive. We've never done that. And so the question is, how do we join God in being life givers if he wants us to do that today? If you were a mother, you may look up and say, well, I'm kind of been a part of giving life, to a degree, to an extent. I've been a part of giving life. And I would agree that, to some degree you have been. But I think you would agree with me that you didn't knit your child together cell by cell, right? You didn't open up your womb and say, okay, now I'm going to create something, create life in here. You carried life. You sustained life. You gave birth to life, but you didn't create life. Right? And if you're a man, we're almost not even in the picture, right? It's like, did I even have anything to do with this child? I have no idea. Now, I've got 3 girls, as you guys know, and one of them, I'm telling you, she is a complete clone of my wife. I don't know that I had any say, any input. I don't know that anything of mine became a part of this child. I'll leave her nameless. You probably know who she is if you've been around our family. But nothing to do with me. It's just an incredible reminder that I didn't create life, right? I was a part of this life coming into the world, but I didn't do that. I didn't create life in this way. And so again, the question is, if God wants us to be life givers, and if we're not good at this, how do we do that? How do we become life givers to our communities, and to our neighborhoods, and to our workplaces, and to our own families? How do we get to the place where we can do that? To answer that question, I want us to look at a story in the book of Matthew chapter 21. This is a story that you are probably familiar with. You've probably heard this story before if you grew up around the church. If you went to church as a kid and went to Sunday school as a kid, you may have seen this story played out on like flannel graph boards when you were younger. Even if you didn't grow up around the church, this is a story that you may remember, you may have heard before. So Matthew chapter 21 is where we're going to be. And this story happens right after Jesus has come into Jerusalem. He's come in for the last time before he is going to be crucified. Okay, so he's just come in on the back of a donkey. Palm leaves have been placed on the ground to welcome him in as their king. And according to Matthew, one of the first things that Jesus does is he goes to the centerpiece of Jewish life. He goes to the central part of Jerusalem, where he goes to the temple. So listen to this with me. Matthew 21, verse 12 says this. Jesus entered the temple area and drove out all who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves. So like I said, you may remember this story. This is one of those stories, I don't know about you, but I love this story about Jesus because I connect to this story about Jesus. When Jesus does miracles where he heals people, that's really cool, but I don't relate, right? I've never healed anybody, but when Jesus gets mad, I'm like, okay, I can relate to that. That's something Jesus did that I get. I can understand. I've walked down that road before. And so you may have heard this story before and you remember the frustration of Jesus or the anger of Jesus or whatever you want to say. You may have heard this in Christian churches where the primary point was Jesus got mad because they were buying and selling in the temple. And maybe there's a point there. But I don't think the whole point of this story is that there should never be anything bought or sold in the church. That's where it's taken a lot of times. And maybe that's valid. I just don't think that's the point of this story. I think there's a layer that's deeper than that Jesus wants us to see in terms of giving life this morning. So I want to look at that layer that goes one level deeper than that, okay? But as we do that, let me just kind of set the context again for you. It says that Jesus entered the temple area. That phrase, the temple area, is a huge clue as to why this story is going to be important. If you think about the temple area in first century Israel, I don't know what comes to mind for you if you think of the temple area, but what they would have thought of, what the good Jews of that day would have thought of, was they would have thought of this as the place where heaven and earth meet. This is the place where it's the only place in all of earth where the presence of God resides in a space to the Jews, right? They had the courtyards for the Gentiles and the courtyards for the Jews, and then for the women, and on into the most inmost room in the temple was what was called the Holy of Holies. That's where the presence of God resided in their minds. And so if you think about that, what that meant is when they went to the temple, that was their one chance. That was their one opportunity to connect with the living presence of God. That was their one time to walk into a space where up there and down here came together. Does that make sense? And it was a huge deal to them. It was a huge thing that they would be coming into the presence of the living God. Because remember what we just said, He is the life giver, right? He is the only one who is the life giver. And so they would come into the temple, and as they came into the temple, they would come in with needs, they would come in with hurts, they would come in broken, and the way they would leave would be full of life because they had been with the life giver. Think of it in these terms. On this particular time, at Passover, there are thousands and thousands of people that are coming into the city of Jerusalem. And as they're coming in, they have these animals that they're bringing with them, or they purchase at the temple to sacrifice. The whole idea is that as they come into the temple, they are coming in with this weight of guilt on them. Because they're looking back at the last 6 months. It's not like they come to the temple every weekend, by the way, because a lot of the people didn't live right there in Jerusalem. They're coming every 6 months maybe, and as they come into the temple, they're remembering, 5 months ago, man, I did that to my wife, and I never should have done that. I said that to my coworker, and I feel really bad about that. I stole this thing from my workplace, and I never... So they got this weight of guilt that they bring into the temple. They offer the sacrifice of that animal, and they walk out with new life. New opportunity to say, the guilt is gone, I have a new chance at doing life the right way. Right? So they come in needing life, they go out having experienced the life giver. That's the whole idea of the temple area, the temple space in this time. And what you're going to see is, like we just read, Jesus gets really upset. It's not that they're just buying and selling. It's that they have missed the whole point of what the temple area is about. So in verse 13, Jesus speaks and he says this. It is written, he said. So he's about to quote from Isaiah and Jeremiah. He says, it is written, he said to them, my house will be called a house of prayer, but you are making it a den of robbers. Think about that statement for just a second. What does it imply that he says this is supposed to be a house of prayer? If you just stop and kind of put the pieces together, what he's saying is, this is the place where you connect to your source of life, right? This is the place where you connect with God. This is the place where up there meets down here and changes it, gives us a new way of life. That's what prayer is all about. Gives us opportunity, gives us a new way of life that we had no chance at otherwise, right? And so he says that's what this space is supposed to be all about, but you have made it a den of robbers or a den of thieves. Again, I don't think he's just upset about the financial transactions taking place. In fact, if you wanted to just summarize it in a way that's really maybe oversimplified, he's saying, this is the place you're supposed to connect with the living God, but you have turned it into a mundane, going through the motions place, a ritual type place where you show up, you buy your animal because that's what you have to do. You sacrifice your animal because that's what the law tells you to do. And then you go about your business. So as he's looking at the temple, he's saying, this isn't a place where you're connecting with God. This is a place you're going through the motions. You're doing your daily duty because you were told you're supposed to do this. That's what frustrates Jesus. He says it was never supposed to be like this. You're not experiencing life, but that's the whole point of the temple. You're supposed to come here to connect with God and experience life, and you're just going through the motions. You're missing it. That's the whole frustration for Jesus. And Matthew, in the very next verse, does something that I think is really cool. He connects this to an idea that none of the other gospel writers do. So Mark, Luke, and John don't connect this, but here's what Matthew says in verse 14. He says, the blind and the lame came to him at the temple, and he healed them. So he says Jesus gets upset. He turns over the tables and the benches, right? He tells them, you are missing the point entirely. The very next thing, did you see what happened? The very next thing that happens, the blind and the lame, those who are hurting, those who need life, come to Jesus, and he gives them new life. He heals them. He gives them a new way to do life. He's just demonstrating exactly what we're talking about. He's demonstrating that when you come into the presence of God, it should change you. It should give you a new way of living. It should be a life-giving experience for you whenever you come into the presence of God. Right? That's what Jesus wants them to see in this moment. He's demonstrating it. And I don't know if you noticed it, but the way that he demonstrates it is by, first of all, he loves them. He says, okay, come over here. He invites them into his presence. He loves them by getting close to them. Second of all, he serves them. And that's the way that he gives them life. He loves them and he serves them. If you were, again, with us last weekend, you know that we said that Jesus fulfilled the entire Old Testament. He didn't just take the Old Testament and say, we're going to start something new and throw it out. He fulfilled it. He lived it out. So I don't know how many pages your Bible has for the Old Testament. Mine has 872. All right? So 872 pages of law. Basically, Jesus fulfilled every bit of that. Right? And then later on, what he does is he summarizes that. And he says, you can take all 872 pages of the Old Testament law and really you can condense it to one word. If you live out this one word, you will be a life giver. Do you know what the word is? It's an action word. Love God. Love your neighbor. Love your enemy. Love your coworker. Love the person that gets on your last nerve in your neighborhood. You just love well. And when you love well, that's where God infuses life into your world. When you love and serve well, that's where God starts to plant new life in your world around you. That's where he starts to use you. Every time you make a decision that, hey, I'm going to love this person well, you are injecting the life of God into that environment. Whatever environment it is, right? And so that's what Jesus is demonstrating here. He's demonstrating this whole idea that if you will love well and serve well, you are planting life. You are a life giver. As he goes on, the next verse is something that's interesting. In verse 15 and 16, he says this. He says, "But the chief priests and the teachers of the law saw the wonderful things he did, and the children shouting in the temple area, 'Hosanna to the Son of David.' They were indignant." So in other words, the religious leaders in the temple are seeing what's happening, right? They're seeing what's going on. And they're saying, Jesus, it's Passover. It is the biggest celebration of the entire year. And you're messing up the rhythm. You're messing up the way that things are always done. You're messing up the details. And while the religious leaders are getting mad, I absolutely love this. It says, the children are shouting. And they're shouting, "Hosanna to the Son of David." So the children probably, honestly, don't even know exactly what they're saying. They probably don't fully understand that. They've heard their parents say that, or they heard a rabbi say that, or whatever the case may be. They probably don't fully understand it, but what the kids get is they see that this man Jesus came into the temple, and now these people are healthy and well because he was here. They see that life happens when God's Spirit is present, right? And so they're shouting joyfully. In the next verse, the religious leaders complain again, and they say, "Do you hear what these children are saying?" They asked him. Jesus replies, "Yes. Have you never read, 'From the lips of children and infants, you have ordained praise'?" In other words, Jesus says, all of your education, with all of the religious knowledge that you have continued to get it wrong, but these kids get it. They get that life comes in the midst of love and service. They get it. The incredible thing about this story, if you put the whole thing together, is what Jesus is doing is he is not saying, in order to receive life, you need to come to this temple from now on to get it. In fact, he's saying almost the opposite. He's saying, in order to receive life and in order to be a life giver, you need to connect to God. That's the way that it works. Jesus knew that not long from this, just a few hours after this, the curtain that separated the Holy of Holies from the rest of the temple would be torn in two, showing that the presence of God was with the people, right? He knew that. He knew that only years after this, the temple building would be flattened. It would be gone. It would be destroyed by the Romans. He knew that. And so you know what I think he's pointing them to? I think he's pointing them to this incredible reality that if we boil everything that Jesus is teaching down into one statement, I think it would be something like this. We have become the place on earth where up there meets down here. Anywhere that we are with the presence of God, that's where life can happen because we are with him. Anytime we say, I'm going to serve this person and do something for them that maybe they wouldn't even do for themselves. That's where life is given. That's where life happens. And Jesus is showing that it's not the building that brings life. It's not the sacred space. It's you. If you are a believer, if you are following me, then the way you love, the way that you serve, that is where life is given. You are a life. Later on, Paul would write, and one of the things that he said, your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit. You remember that? A lot of times we hear that our bodies are a temple of the Spirit of God. We immediately connect it to sexual purity, because that's part of what Paul does in that passage, is he connects that to sexual purity. But he's telling us something so much bigger. He's telling us where the temple used to be the place where the Spirit of God gave life. He said, you are the temple. Wherever you go, in your neighborhood, in your workplace, in your office, in your school, wherever you go, you can be a life giver. All you have to do is love well, serve well, and you become God's conduit for giving life. What an amazing, amazing thing to recognize that God chose us to join him in this process of giving life. When we couldn't do it on our own, when we couldn't create life out of nothing, God said, you just come with me. And as you come with me and follow in my footsteps, you are going to see life in your family. You're going to see life in all the different environments where you planted. Pretty awesome stuff. So the question becomes, well, how do we do this? When do we do this? Where do we do this? And let me just give you kind of a delayed answer first. The delayed answer is that next weekend, when we come together, instead of coming in here and worshiping, what we're asking is that you can come at whatever time you typically come to worship. So if you typically come to worship at 11 o'clock in the morning, show up here at 11 o'clock in the morning, but we're not going to bring you in here. We're going to send you back out there, okay? And I really encourage you guys, come be a part of this. Don't let it scare you away. You have a chance to be a life giver. What you're going to be doing out there is we're going to be planting some trees for the town that have been donated through Trailhead. We're going to be working with some of the schools to help do little improvement projects around the schools. We're going to be working with some individuals to take care of needs that they can't take care of on their own here in town. We are going to be living out the things that we've been talking about the last couple of weeks. We are going to have a chance to be life givers to our community. So I strongly encourage you, plan to be here, plan to be a part of that as we worship in that way next week. With that said, let me just tell you very quickly, there is no reason to wait until next weekend to become a life giver. You can start giving life through the way that you love and you serve before you ever walk out the doors of this building. As you go to lunch, you can be a life giver. As you interact with your family today, you can be a life giver. As you plan for your work week and think about what Mondays are normally like, you can start planning right now. I'm going to love and I'm going to serve so that God plants life in the midst of his workplace tomorrow. What an incredible opportunity that is. Will you guys join me in being life givers this week? That's what God desires for each of us. Let's go to him and ask him to help us in this. Father, we are amazed by you. We are so thankful for you. We are so thankful that you invite us into the things that you are already doing. God, we just freely admit we could not give life on our own. We don't understand how this works, but through you and your presence, through what you're already doing, we can experience the joy of giving life to those around us. Help us in this week to experience that in a new way. Help us to experience you and help the people around us to see you because of what you're doing to us. We love you so much, Jesus, and we pray these things in the power of your name. Amen.